Giselle Roisman. That was the name of the villain of a novel called The Poisoned Apple. There was this girl who really liked to read this story. It has a minor female character, a villain who has to die in the first place. She's lost to the main character at the beginning and she's silenced for good. One day, on some very ordinary day after work, she was heading home and accidentally got into a car accident. And when she woke up, she found herself in the body of Giselle from the novel. Only she was reborn at a bad time, and the girl was in prison, and at that moment, someone tried to poison her. This guy got a very important order to poison a girl, but it seems his plan completely failed when the girl asked him what kind of strawberry syrup was for kids. He immediately decided to taste it, for he wanted to see if he could really mistake the poison for syrup. But at the same second, he began to choke and faint. But for some unknown reason, the poison didn't work on her. As the girl watched them and thought about what was going on, she couldn't understand one thing: how these people could want to test the poison. Besides, they knew for sure that there couldn't be any syrup in it. Initially, Giselle was very hesitant and afraid of being poisoned, but in the end, nothing worked on her. When she began to realize it, she preferred to drink it at once, so as not to make too much fuss. After tasting several poisons, Giselle noticed their different flavors and began to wonder if she had some sort of ability or immunity against something like this. The knights were usually very angry with her, thinking that she was the reason why a lot of mercenaries died. But after a while, when they saw that the mercenaries had done it on their own and the girl had nothing to do with it, they didn't know what to do about it and even started to fear her. Judging by how many mercenaries come to her, the guards must be making good money off of it. Giselle was certainly grateful for her abilities, but either way, she didn't have a plan for getting out of here just yet. She doesn't even realize if there's any point in thinking about it. All she has to do is wait for the new mercenary to bring another tasty poison. As suddenly, the girl heard some laughter, and when she looked up to look at the man, she didn't see anyone, though she clearly heard someone's voice. But surprisingly, there really wasn't anyone around. Giselle suggested that perhaps it was an effect after ingesting too much poison, at which point, she concluded that apparently substance abuse was not going to do any good. This sound did not stop, but on the contrary, became louder and louder. The girl seriously began to be afraid, and thought that somewhere not far away, a ghost is walking and trying to scare her. Then, she immediately got the answer to her question. This voice said he was not a ghost, but at the same time, she never saw him. The girl tried to look around, but she didn't see anyone. So to avoid unnecessary trouble, the girl warned him that the poison hadn't taken effect yet, and after a while she would definitely die, and asked if he could wait so that he wouldn't destroy her before time. To which the guy she still can't see replied that it would definitely work. A few drops would be enough for her. And at that moment, when the jar appeared out of nowhere, this voice asked her to drink it again. The girl asked, "Is it hard for him to wait for the previous remedy to work?" And besides, she herself was beginning to doubt that she was immune. Giselle didn't want to argue with that voice. So to begin with, she still decided to smell this odor, which, as it turned out, was worse than all the others. The second she did, she wondered if the expiring poison could make things worse, because until she died, there was no guarantee that she'd be lucky this time too. After that, the girl turned to that voice again and asked, since she would have to die and drink this poison, if she could ask a favor of it. Apparently that question interested him, and the guy asked what she meant. It turns out the girl wanted to offer him a deal that if she drank this poison and didn't die, he would be obligated to rescue her and get her out of here. To which the voice asked if she was serious, just that she had offered him that option and thought she could actually survive. To which the girl replied, "Why not?" And at this moment, she was thinking that the reason why she was here would have to be found out later. But for now, it was necessary to get out of this place. But before she could give a normal answer, that voice asked if she was sure she could survive once she was out in the open. She's known throughout the Empire as a terrible and powerful witch, and if she escapes, there will be wanted notices everywhere. She has no family, and it's unlikely anyone else will agree to help her. Apparently it's going to be very hard for them to agree on anything. But is it really that hard for everyone to make concessions? But even if he refuses for a long time, Giselle has no choice. She must do whatever it takes to get free as soon as possible. After this, the girl decided to answer his question after all, and said that did he really think that in all the world she could not find a hiding place for herself. And if good people are afraid of her, she even then has one option. You can just go to work for the bad guys. To which the guy asked if she had a specific option of who she could work for, and that the girl replied that there is one person, and in her opinion, he is incredibly cool. After that, the guy asked to tell him about this person, and if he likes her idea, he promised to help him. Giselle thought for a long time, and still after a while told him the man's name. His name is Wayne Iori. Since the girl had already called the name, she began to ask about whether he liked the idea, and what about helping when suddenly, while they were talking about it, another mercenary stealthily approached her, who surprisingly had the keys to the cage. This stranger was very different from the rest of his partners. It was obvious that he knew exactly what he was doing. And there are only two possibilities. He either wants to save her and the owner of that voice won't have to do it, or he wants to destroy her right now without waiting for someone else to do it with poison. Giselle had absolutely no idea how to act or react to this. She didn't have a single item she could defend herself with. As a friend, he uttered some incomprehensible words, as if the enemy of his bride would suffer and perish in terrible agony. She of course tried to run away from him, but obviously he was much stronger at it and more resilient, so had to come up with some new plan, or at least solve the problem in some other way. When suddenly the girl decided to drink some poison again. She immediately remembered what she had just talked to that stranger about. The girl turned to him and told him that she had already drank the poison, and now he should help her out. He had promised to free her and help her if she drank the poison and survived. Giselle had stopped believing that she could count on anyone's help at all, but since she had no other option left and needed to take advantage of any opportunity, she did so, and reminded herself of the agreement. To which the guy replied that as far as he could remember, he said he would think about it, but they hadn't made a contract. But was he really going to watch everything happen and not do anything about it? And then something incredible started to happen. The villain and the girl heard this voice that said he was interested in her, so he could do something about it. All they have to do is watch and carefully analyze every moment. Giselle looked at it all with amazed eyes and wondered more and more that this was all real and not some dream. Suddenly, out of nowhere, some guy appeared. His appearance was really magical. The girl even forgot about the fact that it would not hurt to say hello first of all. Because at the moment, her life, freedom, and safety depends only on him. If the girl can be interesting for him and not create unnecessary conflicts, there will be a chance for liberation. Giselle immediately recognized him and realized that this is the guy that all people are afraid of. He is very cruel and is a real villain. At that moment, the girl suddenly thought that villains could be so handsome. She must have liked him. Except that instead of talking about something and introducing himself, he started looking for something and scrutinized the floor. Turns out he wanted to see proof that Giselle hadn't tricked him and really drank that strong poison. There wasn't a single drop of liquid left in this jar. The girl drank every last drop, and it's obvious that she's fine even after such a powerful remedy, which normally no human being can handle. Judging by his reaction when he argued, the guy really hadn't expected the girl to feel absolutely no discomfort at all. He, like everyone else, even began to have thoughts that maybe he had just mixed up the jar, and instead of poison, it was filled with some other liquid. Giselle was very pleased to realize that she was in a body that could fight such terrible things. But still, this guy's not so terrible. He's got some good stuff. He always stands by his word and always keeps his promises. So, he reminded her that the girl had lived up to his expectations, handled her promise, and proved that she didn't mean to cheat him. So, the guy reminded her that it was time for them to leave now. Amazingly, a few hours ago, Giselle couldn't have imagined that she would have a chance at salvation, and that she even had the possibility and ability not to die from the poison, and that her body was even capable of dealing with it. At this point, she was very curious to know what he meant when he said he knew the very person named Wayne Iori, who is one of the strongest wizards out there. And after that, she even began to suspect that there was a possibility that maybe he was the same Wayne Iori. A few seconds later, they teleported to some other place. It all happened literally in an instant, which betrayed an unforgettable sensation. As it turned out, Because the guy wasn't completely sure of her and didn't trust her, he didn't teleport her to some safe place, and instead, they just ended up in some alleyway. And when the guy noticed her surprise, he immediately asked if the girl is not happy about something, to which she replied that it's not that. She's just surprised that magic really exists. And so, she had this reaction. But since the guy that she was unhappy about something, he offered to take her back and said that if she didn't smile right now, he would definitely do it. At this point, he decided to remind the girl that soon she would definitely be searched for on every street, so it would be better for her to think in advance about where to hide and how to get away to a safe place. Even though it wasn't the most pleasant news and she wouldn't want to think about it right now, it was really helpful advice. To increase the power of wizards, the last wielder of dark magic, Wayne Ayori created a group of his fellow wizards to confront the. As suddenly, now that she had the opportunity, Giselle decided to wonder if he happened to be a wizard connected to the clouds. It turns out the Cloud is a wizarding organization that Wayne created. There was only a small snippet at the beginning of the story that mentioned its creation, but later on there is a lot more information about it. The girl wanted to know about it very badly, and without even waiting for an answer, she asked again, "Is he really one of these wizards who knows Wayne?" It was so interesting to her that the girl no longer knew how to contain her emotions. Even a few seconds of waiting was an unbearable ordeal for her. The guy watched her reaction and desired to know something with a smile, but didn't tell her anything on purpose, as he wanted to pull the intrigue and observe this amazing girl a little more. Well, since he eventually felt sorry for her, the guy decided to say his name after all because he saw how hard it was for her to be waiting for this information. Turns out his name is Renelle, but surprisingly, the girl doesn't recall that name at all. It's very hard for her to remember if there was even such a person in the story at all. She didn't realize if there could have been a character with dark hair and scarlet eyes. No specific person she could remember, because the one she remembered had blonde hair. However, it didn't matter. Giselle couldn't stop admiring his beauty and thanking her fate that she had the opportunity to meet this handsome man. After a while, she began to suspect that maybe he was too infrequent in the plot and wasn't particularly important. Let the organization of the Cloud unite wizards, but there are also those who like to act on their own. This has always been the case. Giselle also worked with a wizard who did his own thing as well, and now she's pretty sure Renelle is one of them. And then they started talking about work, to which the guy said he wouldn't speak ill of her, because he's not interested in doing anything bad to her or making trouble on purpose. As it began to grow dark outside, Renelle asked her if she was going to stay here, for after a few minutes he was sure a search would be organized. And the girl seems to have forgotten all about it, and didn't think it was a good idea to stay so close to the place. But since she didn't have many options and possibilities, Giselle asked him for help, and asked if it would be difficult for him to move her away from this place. After all, if she stays here alone, she will definitely be caught. The girl really hopes for his understanding. Besides, she wants to be with him as long as possible. To which the guy replied that even though he realizes that she has no money or friends to go to, there is no benefit to him. So, he offered to think afterward what she might give him for his help. When suddenly, when the girl had not even time to answer, they heard voices, and it was evident that she was being sought for. When the guy started to think about the fact that there was really no benefit to him, the girl realized this, and said that she could share some interesting information with him. And of course he was immediately interested in it. Renelle had never even thought that this girl knew anything. Well, so that he did not think long and do not doubt, Giselle immediately warned that with the help of this information, he will easily get a promotion. The fact is that the girl has been reading the story carefully and for a long time, and for her she knows everything that will happen in the Clouds of Wizards. She has memorized all the main points, and knows exactly how to use this information to achieve success or gain benefits. Giselle was sure that what he might be most interested in was the future of the main man himself. When the guy hears about it, he's obviously not going to say no and take her up on her offer. But to begin with, Renelle disagreed and asked how he could believe a girl he'd only known for a few minutes. But to interest him even more, Giselle told him that she had gained a secret ability when she drank a lot of poisons. To which he replied that he had never thought there were those besides wizards who could have such abilities. But the girl said it wasn't an ability. It was more like the gift of foresight. But it seemed Renelle didn't quite understand what she meant. So, she had to explain that she had an ability that she could use to find out what would happen to someone after a while. His first thought was that it's just not possible, and she probably just made it up. But on the other hand, since he's a wizard himself, he wants to believe it's true. And at that moment, the men who had been ordered to look for Giselle suddenly walked by. But fortunately, no one noticed them. As the girl once again experienced a feeling of dread, she once again ventured to ask if he would just walk away and leave her here like that. As suddenly, Renelle said a very strange phrase, namely that the girl had tried to use forbidden magic before she was caught. Giselle couldn't understand at all what he meant or what it meant. She asked what he meant by that. It turns out that before her rebirth, the real Giselle wanted to gain great powers by destroying the wizard she was working with. When the girl found out about it, she had to explain it somehow. But the problem is that she wasn't responsible for the real Giselle's actions. It turns out there are a few rules regarding the use of dark magic, and they apply to wizards as well. The thing is, Renelle is here to settle a conflict caused by his buddy who died due to deception on Giselle's part. Its main purpose is to check if the spell was successfully used, and if so, its effects should be studied. And afterward, which was the strangest thing about this whole conversation, he asked her if she would tell him what that spell was. But the main problem is that Giselle really doesn't know what the conversation is about. But at the same time, she can't pretend she doesn't know it, because no one needs to know that she's not the real baddie. She was very scared, but also very interested in figuring it all out, when suddenly, Renelle again said something incomprehensible, namely, star transplantation. Only what it meant was not at all clear. Giselle stops realizing by the minute what she needs to do, and what she needs to say so she doesn't make things worse. It turns out that star transplants can be used to transplant someone not of this world. But is that the reason the girl was reborn into this body? Though that's just her guess, and maybe his words mean something else entirely. And at this point, the fun part starts. He's no longer hiding the fact that he knows for a fact that she has something to hide. And after that, he asked her the most important question, who she was and what her purpose was. All he was sure for sure that she was special, and probably had an important mission, or at least some kind of ability. Giselle felt very uncomfortable, for now she had to be responsible for the other girl, and to restate Renelle's words. All that means is that the girl is here because she was summoned into this world by the real Giselle's spell, but she should have chosen the person for this case carefully. It was incomprehensible to her why she, not young, weak, and ordinary girl, who had never wanted anything like that, had found herself in the other world. After that, Renelle noticed how difficult it was for her to answer that question. So he decided to change the subject a little, and asked about her knowing some important information. Surprisingly, after his hints, as if he knows that maybe he's not the real villain, the girl decided to change her strategy and pretend like she's the real Giselle. But he wouldn't even listen to that. It was more important to him to find out if she could really help him with his abilities. He said she doesn't have to say it herself. It turns out he also has amazing powers. He asked if she could doubt that he had no way of hearing what he wanted to hear. Then, he asked her another question. Something there had been too many of lately. But this time, he wondered what it was like to be in the prison that the wizard had made. But it seems the girl didn't want to answer that question, and it was only for one reason. She was afraid of making things worse and saying the wrong thing. Since Giselle didn't know all of his abilities, she was very much afraid that he had long since known who she really was, and would want revenge for trying to deceive her. The girl began to feel increasingly uncomfortable, and wished every minute that she could finally have a chance to rest and feel safe and secure. But for now, unfortunately, she has to talk about and answer questions that involve things she knows nothing about. After all, if she knew at least some of the information, it would be a lot easier for her. As suddenly, he said really exactly what she had been so much afraid of. It turns out that Renelle was now definitely sure and straightforwardly told her that she was not Giselle. After that, he looked her straight in the eyes and asked her to tell him everything and how she could help him. Renelle wants to hear something really convincing. Apparently he really stopped trusting her, and until the girl proves that she has no bad intentions and that she wants to help him, nothing will change. It was time to tell him specifically what she could help him with. The girl said she could be a poison seeker, and if he's interested, it's really not a bad idea. It does make some sense. It's obvious from his reaction that he's willing to cooperate, but for now he's wondering if it would be a mistake, though he doesn't look like he's going to give up on it now, or think it won't do any good. But to convince him more quickly, Giselle said that no one knew if the ultimate wizard would ever want to be poisoned, and if it ever happened, no one could prevent it but her. And this was more convincing. He had a very surprised reaction, because if you take into account that she can see the future, and in addition to that can search for poisons, she is just indispensable assistant. And I think the guy's starting to realize that plus, in this situation, Giselle really doesn't have any bad intentions. She just wants to be safe and useful. She'd do anything to feel free and not afraid of being taken away again. Let's get right to the point. Renelle didn't lock it up, destroy it, or give it back. That's not bad. Just the day after that conversation, Renelle took her to some strange place, and there were many strange objects there. There was a bad energy coming from most of them. She could feel it very well, and knew this was an unusual place to be. This store was too different from the ones that sell regular merchandise. It's very different here. Giselle immediately turned her attention to one letter, which literally attracted the attention of every person and for ordinary people. It was inexplicable. She really wondered if ordinary people really didn't experience something like this, which was the norm for her. Turns out it was a store that sold cursed items, and for that reason, Giselle didn't understand why she was so uncomfortable being there and looking at some merchandise. When they were just approaching this store and wanted to go in, the girl asked if she was planning on destroying it with a curse, just because the poison didn't work on her. It turns out he's just planning to see how she can show off her skills by working in this place. She'll have to identify and sort poisons for sale and communicate with buyers. She hadn't had that experience yet. But anyway, it was a lot better than sitting in a dark, cold room and dreaming of freedom. When the guy noticed that the girl was a little upset, he decided to remind her that she had offered her own help. Plus, he really didn't force her to cooperate, and told her that if she didn't want to go back then, she'd have to work at the place. It had been 10 days since she had temporarily begun work in this unpleasant store. Renelle had watched her for the first 3 days, but now, he had ceased to appear here at all. When suddenly, during the complete silence, she hears someone's voice. Some guy asking if she had named the cursed doll. It was also an employee of this store. His job is to bring new merchandise around to different stores. As far as Giselle knows, he's in training now, learning how to do the job properly, and learning the ins and outs of being a full-fledged wizard. It turns out, thanks to this job, he can really become a magician, and this is his first step on the road to success. There was always conflict between them. The girl didn't like the days when she had to work with him and answer his weird questions. She didn't like a lot of things. Like when he came to work, instead of doing his job, he spent too long looking at toys. And because it kept him late at the store, that was the main problem. Because his presence was the worst part of her workday. This time, the girl dared to tell him that goods were more often delivered here than bought, and in her opinion, that shouldn't be the case. Some customers come in here occasionally, but for some reason they never buy anything. Apparently they feel there is something wrong with these items, although it's possible that they just come here to walk around and go to some new store, but at the same time, they don't even think about buying something initially. When suddenly this guy showed her a new poison that had a foul odor. It turns out it's done on purpose. But for what purpose, few people can understand. The most interesting thing was that the guy who brought the poison, he didn't smell any bad odor at all. Although at the same time, Giselle could barely breathe. Is further proof that she's the only one who can sense and detect poison. At that moment, she starts to remember the conversation with Renelle and realizes that she's doing her job, although up to that moment, she was sure that she wouldn't be able to do it. When Giselle smelled a foul odor, the guy who didn't smell anything, he said she was some kind of weirdo. Over time, without even getting up from her seat, Giselle learned to identify poison at a glance. She analyzed each object and understood what it really was. Except this store was really not very nice. Even the customers that come to this store, they always leave quickly. When there were no customers in the store, the girl thought about the fact that she had planned to stay in the store and not bother Renelle. but she hadn't seen him for 3 days now. And in that moment, Giselle thought this might be the perfect moment to escape. But did she really decide to run away? Because the guy is a wizard, and it wouldn't be hard for him to know where she is at any moment. She even decided to take a few items as payment for those 10 days. But everything looks like it's not going to work out for her. After all, Renelle still didn't trust her, and must have thought ahead of time that she might have the urge to run away, and especially from a store like that. When the girl had everything she needed and it was time to leave, she began to question whether it was a good idea. After all, if someone notices her now, she'll be in trouble, and she'll never correct such a mistake again. Giselle tried to do her best to look as unflamboyant and inconspicuous as possible, in order not to attract unnecessary attention of others, and especially Renelle. Before she decided to do the deed and run away, Giselle thought that he had already thought of a spell that would make it impossible for her to escape, and because of that, he would know about it and show up at the store right away. But so far, nothing has happened. The girl is very happy and finally felt freedom, although it is too early to rejoice, because it is possible that everything is not as simple as it seems at first glance. Giselle had learned that it was possible to negotiate and use a carriage here, so first of all, she went looking for some transportation. It would be much more convenient and easier to escape that way, when suddenly she saw something frightening. But did anyone notice her? If it was Renelle, it could be considered as bad, for he would never forgive her. Giselle immediately stopped, without realizing it was very dangerous to go any further. But what did she notice after all? It turns out she saw the people who had been ordered to look for her, but it was surprising to her that they were doing it in a place that was near a store for villains. There were too many of these men, and they were trying their best to obey orders and find the escaped girl by any means possible. Since they had no right or option to return without her, they paid attention to every little detail, and when they noticed the announcement, it was obvious to them that they weren't the only ones involved. At this point, the girl wondered how it was possible to open a store for villains near a guard post, especially since Renelle knew that if the girl worked there, she would be found right away. But she happened to say it aloud, and it was at that moment that Renelle found her and answered the question at once. He asked why she shouldn't keep walking and find out for herself, but from his voice alone, the girl was so scared she couldn't even move. Giselle is sure that he's definitely going to start asking her now why she left the store and didn't warn him that she was going to walk the streets alone. But surprisingly, he didn't say a word about what was involved in trying to escape, but rather wondered how she was still able to hide, because if the girl had taken a couple more steps, she would have been spotted for sure. When it came time to explain what she was doing here, the girl just decided to pretend that she was very happy to meet her. But Renelle seemed to be waiting for her to explain herself. I guess he just doesn't want to scare her and is trying to make her realize that it's better that she tell him herself than that he start dealing with the situation on his own, and in that case, it will be worse. At this point, she suggested he clear things up so there would be no misunderstanding. Giselle immediately said it wasn't what he thought it was, and she wasn't trying to. To which the guy asked that if she didn't want to run away, it turns out she wanted to give up, and was finally ready to accept her doom, and then asked if that was true or not. To which the girl replied that she had just gone out for a walk, and that she has a habit of going out all day and coming back late at night. It didn't look very believable, but she tries to. Obviously, the guy wasn't as gullible as she might have thought. He wasn't going to believe those words, and was sure she was determined to trick him. He asked what she had grabbed the can of poison with her then, and then wondered if it was in case she wanted a drink of water. It was a joke, of course, but after that, Giselle knew perfectly well that he knew everything. She was very lucky he didn't punish her and send her back to prison. But I wonder how he could know that she took something with her, and that it was a jar of poison, if he really followed her all this time and saw her every move. As she began to make excuses, Renelle realized that she would never admit it, but lastly still asked what about the money she had also taken from the store, to which the girl replied that she had recently realized that she had never paid him for his help, so the money was only needed to buy him a present on the way back. He found it very funny to watch her try to hide the truth and make up something that was different from her real intentions. Renelle said she's very docile when she gets nervous or afraid of something. Apparently Giselle isn't going to tell him the truth, even though it's been clear to him for a while now what she's doing and what she's doing it for. It's more important for him to hear the truth from her. But if she's up to something, that's too bad. After a while, when they decide to hide in some place and immediately find and try to open the door, but so far, the door still hasn't been opened, they have a few seconds to figure out a way to escape. But when things didn't work out for those men, they didn't break down the door and went on to search further. And as it turned out, it was a special tactic, for if someone was really hiding from them, after the silence, made sure to relax and those people were gone. But really, they were just being purposely quiet and waiting for that moment. Somehow the girl would start talking and be sure that it was okay to not be afraid anymore. These people began to approach, but since they were at a distance, the girl still had time to hide and take the opportunity to escape. Because those people only heard her voice, but they don't know where she is yet. As suddenly, she noticed some clothes and thought of one option. Giselle decided to disguise herself after all, and thus, it would be much less likely that someone would notice her. When Renelle did not understand what she was doing, he began to ask what it was for. But the girl explained that it was necessary for disguise, for if she was now noticed by anyone, she would either be destroyed or return to the prison. As suddenly, she comes up with another plan. But it's more unusual. The guy has no idea what's required of him. Giselle began to ask him to pretend they were kissing, because as the girl remembered, usually in such cases, such people are not touched and do not even approach them. It's very interesting to know his answer, except that he didn't have time to think. He had to make a decision very quickly, because every second is very important. To make it clear to him why it was so necessary, Giselle explained that if they suddenly started running away, they would definitely suspect something and start catching up. So, it would be much easier and simpler to pretend to be lovers. It was certainly an unconventional solution to the problem, but the guy didn't seem to mind at all. It was funny to him that it was the only option she could think of, and when he said he understood everything now, the girl asked him what he was waiting for. Because if he understood everything, why he was still doing nothing. As everything depended only on him, and especially on his consent, the girl could not be the first to do anything. But suddenly Renelle took the initiative after all. If pushed her lightly against the wall, Giselle didn't immediately realize what he was going to do. But in that moment, despite her surprise, she liked everything that was happening. The girl never thought that this kiss would happen under these conditions. And in this situation, it's certainly not the best option. But still, when it comes to safety, she's willing to do anything. It seems to be the moment when everything is about to happen. It looked very beautiful from the outside. Very interesting to know what the guy is experiencing at this moment, and whether he is doing it with pleasure or not. At this moment, he had a very unusual look. The girl felt his energy and fragrance up close. It was truly an unforgettable experience. Surprisingly, even though Giselle thinks he's a very handsome guy and dreams of having such a handsome man, she was very embarrassed and didn't know what to do. Apparently just because she liked him, it was hard for her not to show it, so Giselle felt too awkward. When the guy noticed her agitation and her discomfort, he reminded her that if it didn't work out, she was doomed to die, and then no one would help her. But it seems it was too late. She had literally seconds to make up her mind to finally kiss him. No matter how it sounds, her life, safety, and freedom really depend on that kiss. Suddenly, just at that moment, the girl looked away and saw that one of those people was looking at her. She didn't expect that, and she was even more afraid of everything that was going on. Apparently in this situation, only Renelle feels relatively confident and can do something. He immediately asked her to not look at these people and do her own thing. But it seems that things didn't go quite according to plan. Giselle was very much afraid of these people, and at the right moment she couldn't do what she needed to do. She started crying and attracting unnecessary attention to herself. But when time was running out, the guy reminded her that these people were very close. If she didn't calm down now, there was nothing he could do to help her. It was very hard for her not to look at them. But even though it was a very big mistake, she still looked in their direction every minute of the day. Giselle didn't understand how after she made eye contact with one of them at a time, no one wanted to go over and check out who they were. These guys just passed, and apparently this idea is really good. except that if the girl had done a little better and been nervous, they would have passed a lot faster. The moment had come when perhaps the fellow would demand something in return, for just now he had agreed to help her, though after she wanted to escape, he was under no obligation to do so. She's really very lucky he didn't take her back, and at least for now, he's not looking at her like he wants revenge. She still has hope that maybe he'll forget about it and not start this conversation again. Although apparently, since it's really something very serious and unpleasant for him, he'll definitely bring it up. Even if it doesn't happen soon, he may bring it up the next day or at any convenient moment. How suddenly, as he approached some place in this room, he found a strange wall somewhere nearby. Somewhere he thought an illusion spell had been used. But so far the girl doesn't quite know what that might mean. But it's obvious she's very surprised by it and wants to know something more about it. In the story it was written that when magic is used, a magic circle is formed. Moreover, dark magic leaves a not-so-good energy. It was because of this that the two main characters tracked down Wayne. It was a very important moment, which the girl badly remembered, and though if she knew how much it would be useful to her, and how important it would be to remember something about it, she would have read this book more than once, and would have memorized every important moment. She was sorry that she hadn't been very careful to read this book, and that it might help her now. That leaves the most important question. Giselle asked that if it was magic and it was so easy to spot, why didn't the guards notice anything? Because the guy said it was too obvious. It turns out it wasn't that simple. Absolutely everything was under his control. No one noticed the wall because it was perfected for just such occasions, so that people who didn't need to see it would never notice it. After his words, Giselle immediately concluded that he was a very powerful wizard, and even though he wasn't the most important of them all, he had incredible knowledge and abilities. At this point, they have to decide what they want to do next, because since the girl wanted to run away, will she stay here so as not to appear suspicious? And in fact, Renel could have made up his mind long ago and made his choice, but after 10 days, he still hadn't told her anything. But it's strange why he would do that, because the chances of them trying to find them again are very high. The girl had already forgotten that she had been caught trying to escape a short time ago, and this was probably the moment when he would continue talking about it. Either way, it's obvious this guy is up to something, because there's just no normal reason why they need to go back in there. But before she went there, Giselle wanted to make sure she was going to be okay, and that he didn't intend to get back at her for something. To which he replied very strangely. Renel said that he could certainly think of something, but for now, there was no need for it. Giselle was very excited and immediately said that she would love to get back to her job and it won't happen again. She ran straight to work, for she was too happy not to have to answer for her act and explain why she had done it. It was really funny for him to watch her reaction, plus she looked really cute from the side. Meanwhile, they had already arrived at the store and started to sort out their important business. There was a lot of work to do, so they decided to do it without waiting until the next day. Giselle picked up some papers and began to tell him what she had learned in those 10 days. It was all the data she needed on the various kinds of poison she had tasted over the past working days. Everything was very clear and structured. The girl was really very responsible for her work, and did exactly what she was asked to do in the best way possible. She explained that she understood that he probably found it hard to believe that she could taste many kinds of poison, and that most of them were fruit-flavored. So, she asked to trust her, because it was true. The girl said that the taste of apples is different depending on the amount of sugar in them, the same with poisons. When the girl was waiting for some comment, she didn't think that the guy wouldn't even respond to anything. At that moment, he was just thinking that maybe there was no point in her making it up or deceiving him, because he had seen her drinking the poison with his own eyes recently, as if it were juice or lemonade. This girl was really very interesting to him. He watched her closely and was surprised every time he saw her. She is ready to run from the slightest pain, but is not afraid to drink poison, hates danger, but finds herself in the body of a mad villainess. Such contradictions seem interesting to him, for he has never met a girl who looks alike. He is constantly wondering what lies behind this shell. And at one point, Renel asked, "What's her real name?" Since he knows for a fact that there's actually another girl in this body, he wasn't afraid to ask the question, but judging by the girl's reaction, she didn't expect it and wasn't ready to answer this question. To which the guy replied that he was really interested to hear her real name, because she already knew it, and she hadn't said hers yet. She had only two choices. Either she tells him what's really going on, even though he already knows it, and it's pointless to say anything else, or she continues to pretend she's the real Giselle. But apparently she chose the second option and said her name was Giselle Roisbin. After that, Renelle immediately thought about the fact that she usually says something incomprehensible, but when it comes to her personality, she suddenly becomes serious. For him it was very curious. She is clearly that Giselle with blonde hair and blue eyes, but he knows for a fact that her soul that is in this body is quite different, which affects the perception of her personality. The biggest contradiction is trying to get everyone to believe she's Giselle, even though she's not trying to be like her at all. I wonder if he'll pretend to believe her, or if we can expect a new conflict. Giselle didn't want to make things worse, so she decided to just not say anything unnecessary and listen to everything he said. And after that, the girl asked if he had started to trust her. As much as it sounds like from her side, she seriously continues to believe that he has no clue about anything and will believe every word she says. The boy replied that he was certainly grateful for her efforts and recognized her ability, but he still had some doubts. To which the girl replied that there was not a more harmless and trustworthy person here than she was. Renelle explained that it was all because of his temper. He just has a hard time trusting people. As suddenly, he decided to tell her about what he saw her trying to escape, and that she took all the money from the store. So I guess it's time to come clean and explain why. Surprisingly, instead of yelling at her or creating conflict, he calmly watched her reaction and waited for a response. But what's even more surprising is that instead of apologizing for it, the girl started to get really nervous, because she was afraid he would just take her back. Though perhaps Renelle just understands her, and imagined how scared and uncomfortable she was, it was obvious to him that in her shoes, running away was a normal desire. Up to him, it was great fun to watch her unconscious reaction. He felt like a man who fully understood her real emotion and intention. This whole conversation was as awkward as possible. The girl felt guilty in front of him, but at the same time, she is trying her best to the last to make him believe that she is real. But at this point, it's impossible. He knows everything and he's already figured it out. At this point, the girl decided to remind him that work usually paid for money, and since she still hadn't gotten anything, it would be nice to get paid for her work and time. But ideally, she wanted to get some snacks. Due to her constant work and lack of free time, she hasn't been able to eat properly for days, to which the guy replied that he didn't understand at all what she was trying to tell him. And instead of honoring her request, he decided to show her some magic. It wasn't the best and most spectacular technique, but for now, even with that, he was able to surprise her. He created an incredibly beautiful butterfly and then another one. They were so beautiful and magical that it was impossible to admire them. They were blue and red in color, and when they flew up to the girl, she enjoyed watching them up close. It was an unforgettable experience, and apparently she also wanted to create something like this. But it turns out, even that had a very important meaning. The guy didn't just create them so the girl could admire them or show off her skills. From now on, they would be constantly looking out for her. But it seems that the girl did not hear the word watch and look out. She was more interested in something else, namely, whether these beautiful creatures can talk, to which the guy replied that they only talk to him, to which the girl replied that it wasn't fair at all, because she would also love to talk to them and hear the beautiful voice of these magical creatures. Giselle had admired them for a very long time and couldn't believe it was all real. She certainly believed in wizards, but she had never observed their powers before. A little later, Renelle decided to tell her something very important, for if she did not know this information, there might be trouble in the future. It turns out that the red butterfly is very poisonous, to which the girl replied that as he knows, it's not a problem for her. Then he also told her that blue has special scales that can make it impossible for a person to move. It seems that at this moment, Giselle had completely forgotten that not only she was present in the store, but also Renelle. He was watching with surprise and a smile as she marveled at these butterflies. He still can't get used to how quickly her mood can change, because a moment ago she looked like a scared little girl, and now she arrives excited and focused only on those butterflies. At that moment, He happened to remember that some time ago, she had tried to convince him that she had a special ability. Namely, she said that she could see and know the future of important people. The guy could not understand how she could do it, because he thought that one person could not have more than one ability, and if there were more, he was sure that this person was just exaggerating and trying to seem better than he really was. So, Renelle decided not to wait long, and since he had the opportunity, he decided to ask what she knew about Wayne Ayori. And when the girl heard that name, she was very eager to know for what purpose he needed that information. But it seems obvious by the look on his face that he is absolutely seriously interested in this, and would be very upset if he didn't get an answer to his question. And especially since it was that ability that made him agree to save her and not give her back. So she owes it to him to tell him. When it came time to answer that question, Giselle replied that all she knew was that he was a very powerful wizard, and that he was the most famous villain ever. Afterward, since the girl was enamored of the man, she asked that if the guy ever met him, that he pass on her words that he was the strongest man in this world, and also asked him to hint that the girl would be very grateful to him if he could find him a job that would involve magic, to which the guy asked where she got the desire, and how she could know if this job would be better than some other job, because she doesn't know if she will like it or not. To which the girl replied that it was better to be the tail of a dragon than the head of a snake anyway. Besides, she asked if it wasn't great to work for a big company, to which the guy replied that she had asked to be a poison seeker under his supervision. Apparently he was unpleasant that the girl wanted to change her job and cooperate with someone else. But at the same time, he understands perfectly well that this is her dream, and he can't be angry about it. He saw her joyful eyes and realized that she really wanted to see him, and even from her look and words he realized that she would like to ask him to introduce them, but she just couldn't say it directly. But it turns out it was actually very frustrating for him. He didn't hide his reaction and showed that he was a bit disappointed. After all, he was the one who saved her and gave her the opportunity to be free. Renelle immediately said that he didn't see any profit in it and didn't have to do it. Besides, even if he agreed, it would be very hard and practically impossible, because to offer this man to meet his fangirl is practically unrealistic. When the girl heard the refusal, she did not understand at all what problem or difficulty it could be for him, because he could see him every day if he wished. She would always have to taste his food before he did, to make sure there was no poison or bad ingredients in it. And since she would have to be with him all the time, Renelle wasn't ready for that. He realizes that he's so used to her that he can't even see her for a few days. It would be too hard and unbearable for him. But does that mean he's starting to fall in love with her and can't do without her? Apparently, since he could have introduced her to that wizard a long time ago, he didn't do it for only one reason: to make sure she was only with him and not with any other guy, even if it was for work or some responsibilities. And when she asked the reason why he didn't, he couldn't tell the truth, and said only that such a thing didn't suit him, and he wasn't going to answer to her. After that conversation, he decided to go about his business and say goodbye to her. Though in fact Giselle still had something to say to him, the guy asked her to stay in the store and keep an eye on him. And to keep her from getting too upset and motivated to work, he said he would finally bring her the money in the next few days. When the girl heard the word money, she was really inspired and motivated for this workday, because it was very important to her. But when he was about to leave the store, the girl asked him to stop and wait a bit. Did she really have something to say to him? But judging by her insistence, it was really something very important, or something that couldn't be discussed but another time or a little later on. But before she said anything to him, she looked him in the eyes and just remained silent for a few minutes. The guy didn't understand what was going on and was in anticipation of a single word. He didn't understand why her mood changed so often. Just now she was happy, and before that, she was upset with the wizard. He even had the thought that maybe she might have a secret purpose, and that she was pretending not to understand, and looking for excuses and opportunities to meet with Wayne to ultimately destroy him. But could he really think that about her? And judging by his surreptitious actions behind his back, he was about to do something. At that very moment, those very butterflies appeared. As suddenly, she finally decided to explain why she had stopped him and asked him to stay, except it was unclear why she had just been silent and unable to say anything. It turns out Giselle meant to say that since ancient times, a labor contract has been signed between employees and employers to prevent possible disagreements in the future. She thought it would be much better to conclude it during the probationary period and describe the salary there. And before he left, Giselle asked her to wait. She needed to go get a pen. She was in a hurry to find everything she needed because she was so afraid that he'd just get bored with it and find it uninteresting that he'd just leave. But surprisingly, Renal waited patiently for her and didn't even think about leaving. Apparently, he just couldn't refuse her a second time, so he agreed to her request. Very strange, but even in this situation it was funny for him to watch her. Apparently the guy felt more in charge and he liked it. Besides, the girl really treats him like a boss. In any case, he was very happy that she stayed with him and didn't go to that wizard. But it's very strange that he doesn't show his real emotions and hides his joy that she stayed with him after all. Surprisingly, Renel has been coming more often since he left the butterflies with her, though it seems like it should be the other way around, since he doesn't have to be in control anymore. Thanks to this, she has more free time and sometimes he even gets to go for walks outside. Besides, it's much nicer to do it next to such beautiful flying creatures. Even though they are designed to watch her, the girl is still very happy to have them flying around her all the time. They lift her mood and improve boring work moments. They are much calmer and safer with them. But it was possible that Renel had created them just so that she wouldn't be able to escape anywhere else. As suddenly, the girl heard some sound and didn't realize who it could be. It turned out that it was the same assistant who usually transports the goods to the different stores. He greeted her and said he was very glad to see her, to which the girl also greeted him and said it was mutual. Before he could even enter, Giselle couldn't resist telling him that she was no longer a temp and was on probation, so she asked to be called an intern from now on. But to make him believe it for sure, the girl told him that she had even signed a contract and would soon receive her first salary, which she had been waiting for a long time. The contract specifically spelled out the probationary period and the exact time she would become a full-time employee. At least she could be sure that Renel wasn't even thinking about sending her back or making her the subject of experiments. This contract not only provides her with employment, but also guarantees her longevity. And at the moment, that's the most important thing, even though it doesn't say she's safe. Even so, Renel trusts her. He's not thinking of getting rid of her. After the girl told him everything important and interesting that happened to her lately, this guy looked at the doll and said he wants to buy it. Does he really need this cursed doll? Except that he didn't want to touch her, and in order not to do it, he asked her to do it for him. But as a result, he did touch her, and hoped very much that nothing bad would happen afterwards. Giselle really couldn't understand what he needed that doll for if he was even afraid to touch it. It's really very strange to look at from the outside, and at the same time it's amazing why someone needs such things at all. When he had already given the money for the doll and became its owner, the guy thanked the girl for her help and said goodbye. After that, the girl sat on her chair and looked at the shelf where the doll had been. She was very unaccustomed that someone had bought it, although it gave off bad energy. But it was an irreplaceable decoration of the store. Giselle still can't get used to the fact that they're still watching her and are still around. She still doesn't know the place where they keep disappearing and hiding. When some customers come into the store, when they appear again and again, the girl is happy as if she is seeing them for the first time. She has the same emotions as she had when she first saw them. If it wasn't for work and a lot of responsibilities, she would definitely watch them all day long. They are really very beautiful. Their incredible color is very eye-catching. The shadows then emanating from Renel's fingertips must have been made using dark magic. But unlike the shadows that had appeared when that villain had been absorbed into the prison, these were more shiny. But at that moment, she had the thought that perhaps it had something to do with the fact that he himself was glowing and shining at that moment, and it was possible that it also depended on his mood. Suddenly, a guy came into the store. The girl was happy at first, but then realized that it was for nothing, and it would be better if he didn't come in. He was obviously not happy about something. As soon as Giselle decided to greet him, she realized it wouldn't do her any good. This guy was conflicted from the start. He looked very angry. The girl couldn't understand at all what she had done that made him talk to her like that, and look at her with such an evil stare. It turned out that he wanted to ask her if she was the same girl who was doomed to perish, who was taken away by Mr. Rennell. But I wonder why he needed this information. But since she knew she needed to get this problem resolved quickly, the girl still asked how she could help him out, to which he answered her and asked if she would answer his question, to which the girl replied that she did not understand why she had to tell him anything, as it was her private life, which was nobody's business. It turns out that this guy was supposed to work in this store, and he is interested in this question only to find out who was put in his place. Apparently he really wanted to work here, but for some reason, he was denied it. Then, he said he wanted to meet Mr. Rennell, and asked where he could be found soon, to which the girl replied that her boss's schedule was too tight, and so it would be very difficult to meet him. But it seems the guy didn't believe her when the girl said she couldn't help it. He's sure she has many reasons why she doesn't tell him anything. As suddenly, the same guy who sometimes brings goods to this store comes into the store. He heard some loud noise and decided to come to the rescue. When that stranger saw some guy coming to help her, he immediately decided to leave the store and promised to come back. At least you could tell from his reaction that he was just scared and decided to run away before it was too late. Apparently he felt confident only when he was talking alone with the girl. Sometimes another guy came in and the confidence was gone somewhere. After this situation, she went outside to admire the sunset. Usually at this time, she likes to take a walk. But since the girl was at work, she didn't have such an opportunity. Since there was an illusion spell in the alley, she could sit there and feel safe. In fact, it was very convenient because she didn't have to be afraid of anyone seeing her. It was like she was invisible. All the streets plastered with wanted ads with her image, so it was impossible to mindlessly stroll along this street. But at the same time, constantly sitting in the store is very tiring. It was necessary to choose the most suitable option. Giselle thought about the fact that if it wasn't for her boss, she would hardly be able to use such facilities and be able to live a normal life at all. If she just works here without meeting any of the main characters, she'll have no say in what happens in her future. And since Rennell has no plans to introduce her to Wayne, she has little chance of getting into the cloud. But at this point, she already realizes that staying in that store isn't the best idea. For example, there might be more customers like that guy, and not everyone is going to just leave. So, the girl made the decision to ask someone to put the same doll that customer had recently picked up in the store. It at least scared most people away a little, and after it was gone, that unpleasant situation happened right away.